The third day of the Summer School of Physics of University of Valencia. I hope you are enjoying it. And the next speaker that we will have, as you guess, is Victoria Sánchez Muñoz, because I think you can read it. So I will talk a little bit about her. She's from a small village of Spain, from Alicante, called El Pinós. She did her bachelor degree in physics here at the University of Valencia and a master's in theoretical physics in the University Autónoma of Madrid. She's currently doing her PhD in Ireland at the National University of Ireland, Galway, and her research focused on quantum games. So I hope you enjoy her speech.
Good morning, everyone. If you cannot hear me clearly or something, please let me know. I'm Victoria. First, thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to Daniel for inviting me. So today I will speak about the quantum game of life. Maybe the title is a bit confusing for you, but hopefully you will understand what I mean by that. So as Daniel was introducing me, I was born in a small village in El Pinós, in Alicante. Then I did my bachelor's in physics here at Universitat de València. My supervisor was Vicent Jiménez. Maybe some of you know him. Then just after finishing my bachelor, I got a grant to go to Germany for 2 months in Darmstadt. It was a very, very nice experience, so I would encourage you to apply for those kind of things, for programs for undergraduates, or if you're graduated, to apply for grants. Apply for everything, that's my advice. So then, when I finished in Darmstadt, I came back So I came back to do my master's in theoretical physics at Universitat Autónoma de Madrid. It was 1 year, so after I finished, I was a bit tired of studying, as many people, I guess. So I decided to stop, and I got a job in Barcelona, programming. It was not too bad, but I didn't fully enjoy it. I was there for 9 months. And then I decided that I wanted to pursue a PhD. So I came back home to work on my applications and to rest as well. After some time, I managed to get funding to start my PhD in Ireland, in the National University of Ireland, Galway, since October 2019 until now. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe you would know Galway because there's a song called Galway Girl by Ed Sheeran. You should check the video. It's fully shot there, so you can have a flavor of the city. It's a very nice city, but it rains a lot. You need to get used to that. Okay, so, and 1 month ago, I was also given a grant to go for a month to Paris at Sorbonne Université. It was a very nice experience. Again, apply for everything. So I came back, and what I'm trying to say with all of this is that life is non-linear, if you know what that means, but it's okay to just move forward and back. It's okay to hesitate on what you want to do, but yeah, you will find out at some point. So I said I'm doing my PhD currently in quantum games. Maybe you don't know what that means. I didn't either before starting. But let me tell you a bit about games. Game theory is a field in mathematics. It started back in 1928, more or less, with John von Neumann with this paper on the theory of games of strategy. Before that, it was not a fully established field in mathematics. So why is it a field itself? Well, because a game is an interaction between rational players that want to achieve some goal. So you think of a game like that, you have your mathematics to model that. So game theory studies games as chess, rock, paper, scissors. Guess 2/3 of the average is just a game. But it has also several applications. on modeling human and animal behavior. For instance, it's fairly used in trading and markets. It's also used in diplomacy, biology, etc. So on that, I would advise you to watch this film. It's a very nice film. It's called A Beautiful Mind, Una mente maravillosa, with Russell Crowe. And it tells you the life of this mathematician, John Nash, that did some studies that led to the fully development of game theory. And he got a Nobel Prize in economics as well. So it's a very, very nice film. So I'm talking about games a lot. So let's play. For the game that we're going to play, I need a referee and 2 players. I will be the referee, so I need 2 players to come, 2 volunteers, let's say. Anyone? It's a very easy, don't worry. Yes, come on, yeah, I need 2, so. Okay, come forward, thanks. You're more interactive than my students in Ireland. Come here, please. Thank you. So I have here 2 coins, me, the referee, heads or tails, okay? And I will give the players as well 2 coins, heads or tails. 1 for you, 1 for you. Then I will ask you to move there. You cannot communicate, please. No, you here, you here. You cannot communicate during this, okay? So don't look, please don't hint what they should do. Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is I will give the players these coins, input coins, okay? And they will need to give back to me the output coins, the pink ones, okay? How do you win, right? So you cannot communicate. When I give you the coins, you cannot look at each other. You will need to decide what you want to do, okay? Yeah? So how you win? Well, here are the 4 possibilities of input coins, head, tail, and all that. So how you win? If I give you heads and heads, you both need to give back to me the same coin. Both heads or both tails. Is that clear? The same for this. Don't worry, we have time. I can explain again. So if one of you gets heads and the other tails, you need to give me again the same coin. And only in this case, when both get tails, you need to give back to me different coin. So you heads and him tails. Here is 4. So for these 3 situations, you win if both your coins match. Okay? And in this last situation, if they are different. Yeah? Questions? Yeah? Fine? Okay, so what I'm going to do is you will look over there. I don't want you to communicate. I will give you coins, and please don't give them clues about what I'm going to give them, okay? Because you know how they can win. And you know, okay. Yeah. So I'm giving you this coin. I'm giving you this coin. Okay, that. And you need to give back to me the pink one with your choice. Whenever you're ready. Yeah? Yeah? Now look. Okay. Okay, give back to me that. I will give you, we'll play again. Okay, but you don't know how you perform now yet. Okay, give me it back. We will do it again. Here's your coin. And here's your coin. Okay? Again, whenever you're ready, give me the pink one. Yeah, you ready? Please. Let's do it again. I like to torture, apparently. Okay, let's do it again. Yep, sorry, yeah, that one, yeah. So here's your coin, and here's your coin. Whenever you're ready. Yeah? Yeah. Let's do it again. For the last time, okay? I promise. So give it back to me, thank you. And yeah, give me this one, I will give you. Okay. Okay, you're done. Thank you for your cooperation. I'm sorry for you to be here. So, as we have more or less counted, they won twice out of 4 times that we played. So that's 50% of the times. Okay? 50% of the times. No matter how you do it, if I keep the setup like this, the maximum number of times that they can win is 3 out of 4. 75% of the times. And that's it. They cannot win further than 3 out of 4. Questions at the end, yeah. Yeah, I will explain later. So yeah, 75% of the time. However, what happens if they would have their coins? What happens if I give them as well qubits? Qubits are quantum bits or quantum coins. Okay? So in this case, they would also have their output coin, pink one, but in this case, I will give them these qubits in addition. And these qubits are prepared in certain state. Don't worry about the specifics. But in this quantum version of the game that we just played, or that they just played, what will happen is that when they get their input coin here, they will do some operations on their qubits. So some operations. And depending, the qubits have possible results, 0 or 1. So depending on the operations depending on their input coins, they would do some operations, and they would measure, they would measure their qubits to find if it's 0 or 1, okay? And depending on the result of their qubit, they would output either heads or tails, as we just did. So with this, okay? So yeah, when they perform their operation, they give back to me the output coin, and with this setup, under certain assumptions, they can win 86% of the time. Remember that without that, it was 75 with the use of quantum coins, or quantum bits, or qubits. The maximum winning probability of this game is 86% of the time. This is very nice because you can win more often than if you don't use quantum bits or quantum coins. The game that I just presented to you is called the CHSH game. Okay? This is just what I was explaining to you. The winning conditions, the no communication condition, that they cannot communicate while they are playing, and that with normal coins you win 75% of the times, and with quantum coins you win 86% of the time. And why is this called the CHSH game? Well, because it's based, this game, on the Closer-Horn, Shimoni, and Holt inequality in quantum mechanics. This inequality was proposed in '69 and is very important. So let's give you 2 sentences about quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics studies the smallest components of that form the entire universe. The thing about quantum mechanics is that very different and very strange phenomena happen there. And back in the 30s and 40s, people were not very happy about quantum mechanics, and even Einstein didn't believe that quantum mechanics was a good theory, that there was something wrong, it was incomplete. So when a theory, when you don't believe that a theory is good enough, what you do? Well, you come up with some tests to say to test whether the theory predicts the experimental result or not. And this inequality, CHSH game inequality, was one of those tests, a test to find out whether quantum mechanics was good enough or not. These tests are also known as Bell inequalities. So for the game that we played before, remember 75% of the time is the classical maximum to be the Bell inequality, but quantum mechanics can go beyond that bound. And if you're not very familiar with quantum mechanics, you might think that it's only on the lab, but well, of course, this inequality, the test was passed by experimental results and by quantum mechanics, and many other tests. So we have that quantum mechanics so far works very well. And yes, I said quantum mechanics is everywhere. For instance, a laser that is everywhere is one of the most quantum mechanical objects that you can think of. So it's in the scanners of the supermarket, in the DVD readers. I don't know if that's used anymore, but in many other applications and our daily lives, basically. So the LED lights as well, it's because we have a deep knowledge of quantum mechanics. We can develop this technology. And any other technological device that we use every day. So I said that this is the CHSH game. It's a quantum game. So what's a quantum game? Well, and why do we care about quantum games? Well, because some problems or some situations, it can be explained as using a game theoretical framework. For instance, as I just said, the CHSH game is based on this inequality in quantum mechanics. It's based on the quantum foundations. Can be this problem in quantum foundations of quantum mechanics can be explained as a game. So you have your players, your rules, your consequences, and your payoffs. My research is about quantum games in the theoretical aspect, and is based, to give you a flavor, on this inequality. But a quantum game is any game when we add quantum resources. Quantum resources could be quantum particles, qubits, qubits, whatever, quantum measurements, all of that. You might think, so yeah, you have your game, you analyze what happens, as I just did here. We said 75% of the time, and we arrived at with quantum resources, it's 86% of the time. So you analyze what happens in the game, and then you apply the results. Okay, so quantum games is fun subfield by itself, but it has applications in quantum computing, for instance, with quantum algorithms in complexity theory. There's some overlap with quantum games, because as I said, you can think of some problems as a game. It has also applications in quantum information, particularly in quantum cryptography. It's a very hot topic right now, in communication and protocols, and also in quantum foundations, in the concepts of entanglement and non-locality. If you want to play more, there's this version of the quantum tic-tac-toe, or tres en raya. with quantum rules. Don't worry, it's very simple. But you can play now online. This is the link, and you can even choose the language that you want, and if you want the full version with the explanations or the instructor versions to have it, for example, as a workshop to try to explain to teenagers some concepts in quantum mechanics. And it's fun, more fun than the usual one. Okay. So I said, explained that my PhD is about quantum games. Maybe some of you are thinking about doing a PhD or already have it, so I wanted to say a few words about PhD. So a PhD is typically 3 or 4 years, depends. In France, I think it's 3 years, here is 4. Where I am is 4, so it depends. And basically, you need to work with yourself, by yourself, and your supervisor on a topic of your interest. And what you want to do is you want to contribute to your field. A PhD has pros and cons, of course. The cons is that it's hard. Okay. Not going to lie, it's hard. It can be very lonely, especially in COVID times, but even without COVID, it can be very lonely. It can be frustrating at times. It's completely normal. And also, since you are working with a supervisor, the relationship that you have with them can affect your experience in the PhD. But there, of course, there's some pros, that you learn a lot about the topic that you're interested in. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn how to manage your time. You meet many people, usually. You can travel to conferences, to seminars, to all of these things, and you improve your communication skills. That's very important for research and life in general, I would say. So if I have to summarize the PhD in a sentence, would be that it is an emotional roller coaster. So sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, but for me, at the end of the roller coaster, I have enjoyed it. Might be not for everyone, but this is my experience so far. Haven't finished, but let's see. So my take-home messages for you today is that quantum mechanics is super strange, but it's super fun. Okay? Some very weird thing happened there, so I really like it, of course. And then that a quantum game is any game when we add quantum stuff somewhere, in the players, in the strategies, however, and that quantum games have applications in quantum cryptography, quantum computing, quantum foundations, etc. So that's it for me, but I'm sorry, when I finish a presentation, I need to tell a joke. I cannot help it, I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. So the joke goes as follows. Why did the mathematician spill her food in the oven? Because the directions of the recipe said, put it in the oven at 180 degrees. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I see there's some laughter that maybe, yeah, take your time for the joke.
Thank you, Victoria, for the talk. So if anyone has any question, raise your hand. Okay.
In Spanish or English, however you're more comfortable.
Yes, it's better in English because...
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. Is the coin game related to the Nash game theory or the prisoner's dilemma?
Yes, you can think of, okay, so when I was talking about the Nash, John Nash, somewhere, okay, so yeah, this man developed what is known as a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium is a solution concept. That means that every game will have a solution, if you think of a solution as a Nash equilibrium, in which no player wants to unilaterally deviate from that. So in the prisoner's dilemma, there's a Nash equilibrium that is not ideal, because they would be better off if they would deviate, but that's the rational solution. So in this case, the game theory that we use is even simpler. We just think of the payoff. So you win if that is fulfilled, and you lose if that's not. So in this game that I was explaining to you, what you want is to maximize the payoff, because they are playing both together. So they both win or they both lose. When there's some competition, then the concept of a Nash equilibrium plays more a role into defining the solution of the game. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions?
Do you run a simulation in your PhD, like agent-based model? I don't know. I was thinking about you can simulate a player like an agent that have policies and make decision, have a goal.
Yeah, in my case, it's more analytical.
Okay.
I'm just trying to maximize a function.
Paper and pen.
Sorry?
Paper and pen.
Mathematica,
Right.
more or less, but yeah. Yeah, so far, but yeah, there's people who do this evolutionary game theory, so you need to take into account then in a graph or in a network, and you need to take into account that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
And in quantum games, do you take into account the possibility that players can agree to have a certain comportment in advance?
Yes,
of the
yeah.
game?
That's for the 75%. I didn't allow them to think about the game or to talk. If they would agree to say, okay, I will always output heads, and I will always output heads. So taking into account that the coins are probabilistic, 3 out of 4 times, you will get this. So you get this, and you will always be outputting this. So in here, you would win, you would win, you would win, and you will lose.
So does the maximum correspond to this situation where
yes,
this rule
yes.
is not there anymore?
What do you mean?
I mean, we said before the rule that they cannot communicate, but the maximum does count that they can communicate, or no?
Yeah, that they communicate before the game starts.
Yeah.
Before they can be here and say, if you get that,
And
I will output this.
And does the maximum change if we continue to say that they cannot communicate?
During the game, yes.
Okay, and how much?
What do you mean, how much?
The probability, how much does it change?
No, the maximum is 75%.
If they communicate and they don't communicate,
So
it's
they
the same.
start before I give
Okay.
them their coins. They are here together,
Okay.
and they can agree. But when the game starts, they cannot communicate any further.
Okay.
Yes, they agree before, then they are separate, and there's no way for them to communicate which coin they got.
Yeah, okay.
Does it make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, I was wondering if they cannot communicate before.
Oh, no,
one
before
case.
they can, yeah. Well,
Okay, before they can communicate.
Yeah, before.
Okay.
I guess the question is if they don't communicate, if they don't agree to do a thing. I mean, if the coins that they are revealing are completely random.
then maybe it would be 50% because you
Exactly.
would go 50, yeah, I guess. The 50%. The maximum, yes, you can go below that, of course, yeah.
Anyone has?
So, when you do a quantum version of this game,
Yep.
what kind of operations do you do on your qubits to achieve that 86%?
Yeah, in this particular case, it is enough to do a rotation. Okay, so the allowed quantum operations are unitary operations. We don't think about the coherence or anything. But with this, if you do a rotation about the x-axis, so just a rotation in this plane, for instance, they can achieve the 86% of the time. You don't need to go fully general. With that, it's enough, and it's a bound that is optimal.
Okay. Anybody has another question? I would like to ask you one question.
Yeah.
You told that is still developing all this theory, and I was wondering if there's any current nowadays application of this theory. If I mean in industry or in other fields that are not physics, that they are using this kind of rules that are different from the traditional probability or game theory.
I don't understand what you mean.
I mean, quantum game theory is different from the classical game theory. And I'm wondering if there's any application that is nowadays for this theory, because it's still developing, but if they had the time or any idea to apply it in nowadays problems.
Well, yeah, as I said, the theory is itself the same, but you just add quantum mechanics, and then you want to maximize something or see what happens. But for instance, in these applications, where is this? For instance, okay, so in complexity theory, that means analyzing how hard it is to solve a problem, and then you want to classify how hard problems are. For instance, there's a big result from 2021 that they use a quantum game, and they arrived at studying this game that a complexity class, some problems are equivalent to these problems. For instance, also in cryptography, you can think of communication as two players wanting to win a game, and then we have the eavesdropper, so they are kind of competing in this game scenario. Then in the concept of non-locality, which is what we just played, you can try to come up with, Bell inequalities. That means situations in which the maximum classical has a value, and then the quantum version has an upper value. So there's this quantum advantage, and this quantum advantage can be used to, for instance, generate truly random numbers, because we don't have a generator of random numbers, it's pseudo-random. But for that, you can use the Bell inequalities to have the games to achieve Bell inequalities that have some applications in other fields. Yeah, does that answer your question, I guess? Thank you.
So thank you for the talk again, and we'll go to the next one. Okay, so the next speaker is Gabriel Torregrosa, and he will talk about understanding life from a physicist perspective. You can start.
Hola. Sí, se oye. Perfecto. So, hi everyone. So, well, I'm Gabriel, I have been already introduced. And I would like first to raise a question of how many people in here know about biophysics or had a course in biophysics. Okay, maybe just one hand. Okay, 2, 3. So yeah, when I was here, I studied in Valencia. Okay, this is me. Hi. And I did a bachelor in here. And but that time, biophysics in Valencia was asymptotically tending to 0. So basically, I didn't learn much. I specialized in quantum optics with Armando, professor in here. Quantum optics, quantum information theory, and then I went to Germany to keep going to the Max Planck Institute of Quantum Optics in Germany, and there I had my first course in biophysics. So then I decided to change and say, okay, yeah, I like it a lot quantum, but classical looks even better. So yeah, now I'm doing the PhD at University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and I'm doing in a department of biology, so medicine and life science. So I was basically applying everything I learned in physics to this field, and I would like to show you a bit the passion of what we are doing in this field. So what are my main interests? So I like a lot of statistical physics, I like parameter inference, and biophysics. In this case, I'm specialized in fate commitment and developmental stages. Okay, so basically this is me now, like during my PhD. So basically, we're trying to work out everything and try to figure it out, like what I'm doing, like during my third year. So yeah, I want to show you just a few phenomena of what biophysics is like. See, for example, these 2 examples. Is this a laser? No, this is a laser. Okay. So the first image that you can see in here is a flock of birds. So these birds are have leaders and followers, and they try and show an emergence, a complexity emergent phenomena. So they move with very simple rules that can be derived mathematically. And they have very funny properties, since if you mathematically derive them, you can approximate this, since you have like thousands of birds as an adiabatic gas. We like a lot of mathematicians and theoretical physicists. But what is surprising is that all this self-organization and complexity is racing for very, very basic rules that are rules that statistical physics have already derived for gases. What you see here is Drosophila melanogaster in the early stages. So what you are seeing basically is the inner part of the egg. And what you see are the inner, so the nucleus of the cells that have been marked. So what you are seeing there is that during just a few hours, all this process is generating a lot of complexity, like cells are self-organized and generating fluxes and are starting to form the axis of formation of what the Drosophila will be at some point, okay? So in here, we're already like showing a lot of complex behavior that from a biophysics perspective can be very interesting, because the cells are taking fates, they are taking forces, but where are these forces coming from, and what is generating this really long distance spatial like communication that is being showed. Here is just 2 cells, and what you are seeing that is the nucleus, so all the telomers that at some point, because of the forces, are going to be split into 2 cells. And we can show more examples. This is, for example, bacteria. And these bacteria need to communicate through electrical communication. That is something that was shown just 4 or 5 years ago. So like bacteria doesn't have neurons, but still they communicate through electrical signals. because they need to communicate very fast, because as they grow, like they get without resources, so they have to communicate, hey, to the rest of the community, don't grow anymore, because like we are going to die if you still keep growing. Okay, so all this complex phenomenon is life. So life is complex, and life is very diverse. Okay, so it has usually and mainly in biology be surrounded, specialized in the different types of biological systems. Okay, so usually like people study virus, there's embryos, there's even cognition that has lead to deep neural networks and all these inspired biologically systems that now we are applying big data, for example. Bacteria ecosystems, so we're ranging from the very minimal and the smallest part that could be RNA and proteins to the biggest up to ecosystem systems. Okay? But the question that one could arise is, okay, biology already exists, so why biophysics? Like, do we need a physicist coming here and saying something about if there's already a specialized level? So the thing is that physicists have been trained with a very different way of seeing life. So we have our physicist conceptual toolbox that we have been trained like during high school. And in here we have dynamical systems. We know how to resolve the ordinary differential equations. We have complexity systems. If you have done network theory, for example, we have like analysis of symmetry breaking and phase transitions. We have stochastical processes, statistical mechanics, fluid dynamics, and all these concepts, all these toolbox, can be applied to all the different like systems. So basically we're applying a mentality or a new idea of approaching life. With that into account, I just want to remark a caution note, because I mean, it has happened to me a lot in a lot of presentations and physics, and that's why like sometimes at some point I decided to move to biophysics. Is that usually there's a bit of a complex in physics. So if you see this, usually like this is our brain, and you can imagine that usually we point as physicists here, and the biology is here. But like most part of the time, like this is the real scientific community saying, yeah, what the cell like this person is saying. So this shouldn't be like the idea. We shouldn't bring our ego, and life should be more like this. This should be a more accurate approach. Okay, this is a physicist, this is a biologist, and if you like Venn diagrams, that I like, because they are very easy to understand. So biology, or biologists in general, we have like some questions. Physicists, inherently, because of our training, we have some other questions that are a bit different, and we will share, of course, like questions in common. So the thing is how we can combine that to make a bigger spectrum of the questions that we are asking about life and we are trying to interrogate and answer. Okay? So as I have shown you, physics, like biophysics, and the question of life is huge. So I will just want to go with a couple of particular examples where like we have bring or physicist ideas to try to answer them. So the first one is the limits of vision, okay? And the limits of vision come very early with this man that I don't know if you know him, but the question that he made is how dim a light can be to be visible. We are in the early 20s. We are in 1911. So this man, Nobel Prize, was Hendrik Lorentz. And it was the beginning of quantum physics. And at that time, they were already like deriving the first models of quantum mechanics. And he did the calculations in their seminar, in the first seminars, like when he was a teacher in the university. And he computed that it was about 100 photons. Okay, so we're already talking about photons. But he made one question to a friend of his that was a specialist in vision and cognition and say, Yeah, it could be that the system has some errors, so like really the photons that are getting inside the eye is even a lower number. So what the question and the real question that Herman Lawrence was making at that time is, can sight, like can our vision be able to count photons? So this is already like a very interesting and amazing question. Like, can our vision system be tuned in such a fine way that we can count single photons? So let's go for like what the system is. It's a very complex system. So we have the photons, and the photons first have to arrive to the eyeball, and they scatter, and the moment they arrive to what is a cell, this is just a single cell that is a photoreceptor that at some point is activated through rhodospin molecules that they change the configuration, and the moment they change the configuration, they send a signal to the bipolar cell, and then you already know, like there's a chain of signals, electrical signals that come to our brain, and then our brain say, hey, I've seen like some light. Okay? So I want to go like to a very like broad like idea that came during the 20th century. So this could go into the psychophysics, like world. Psychophysics could be the capacity of our brain or our intellect to see physical magnitudes, okay? So how we perceive like reality. So first we need to do a bit of maths. So we could derive the quantum like equations and arrive to the solution that classical light like follows Poissonian statistics, okay? So this is the Poisson distribution. So we know that the probability of getting a number of photons like depends on the mean. So this is the Poisson distribution. I hope that you are a bit familiar with. Okay. So the interesting is that the I will be the intensity, and the alpha is all the rest of the messy details about how the light gets into your eye, is scattered around, the one that you are perceived, the one that gets into your like system and arrives to your brain. Okay, so messy details, intensity of the light source. Okay, so we're going to make an hypothesis. We are getting a signal, and we're saying, yes, I detect a signal in the moment that I get to some minimum photon number that arrives to my eyeball. What will mean? I will see, and I will say, I see the light in the moment that the number of photons is like a number k or superior. So everything above like certain number of photons that are getting into my retina, I will see like I will see like a dim flash and say, okay, I have seen it. What is interesting is this experiment has been done. So it will be very similar to when they like so the Rutherford like experiment. They put a person in the dark and like they waited until they see some light in the expression. So well, just before showing the results, like this is the distribution. These are the distribution for different Ks and different alphas. So what you can see already is that alpha, the only thing that is making is displacing in the x-axis. K, that is the interesting, what is changing is the slope. So we can really discriminate the K, because like we will have, like if we do the experiment, different behaviors of the K for the experiment. So we will be able to really compute what is this K minimum. And these are the results. So the three people that did, the three authors, were talking about 1940, did this experiment, and they came up with a K that is more or less 6. That is 6 photons, like in the moment that about 6 photons enter our cornea, we are saying, hey, we are seeing a light. Of course, these 6 photons, moreover, like it's very unlikely that they arrive into the same spot. So usually they will be scattered around. So what is very likely is that just with one photon that is hitting our retina, one of these photoreceptors and are activating it, is able to send all the signal to our brain and say, hey, I have seen the light. Just with one photon. It's very amazing that we have like the level of the cutoff of detection so low. Okay? So first, that we have to take into account, like this fit is for different alphas. Like remember that the alpha is that constant that we have put for all the messy results. And of course, like my grandpa will not see as good as me. So this alpha will be a bit different for depending on the age and all this part that is more biological of the mechanics. But the keys are constant. So what we are seeing is that there's kind of a universality in this process, okay? The second thing is that we are not seeing in a binary way. So if we were seeing just yes or no without any relationship with the quantum mechanics, that is the inner stochasticity of the sources of noise, then we will see or no or something. But in here we have a curve. We have a region where there's probability, and this probability is not the probability of our vision, it's the probability of the reality. So the inner like minimum stochasticity or the inner noise of this system is enough to make like these quantum fluctuations are affecting our ability to vision. So we're having a macroscopic like system, like a real world system that is like somehow like connected with the quantum randomness. So we have a limitation, like a very basic limitation of physics that is already affecting our like macroscopic like perception. This is what I already commented, single cell perception. Like it is very rare that all 6 photons are arriving to the same cell because we are having like thousands of cells in the retina, okay? So it can be a bit more quantitative because this was just putting a guy like seated in front of a dark screen and seeing if it sees a point or not sees a point. Okay, so this was 1940, it's very early, but at some point they were able to make dissections. So we're in dissections of single cells of this retina, in this case of toad, poor toad. Like they get the eye out of it and then like put just one cell of the retina. This is a cell, like suck it with a pipette, and then they were putting like flashlights on it. So these were the flashlights in time, and these are the ticks where the flash was showing. And this was the current that was generated over the cell. So what you can see is that there's already like things that seem to be quantized. So this seems that there's just a photon that has arrived. Maybe this seems 2 photons that have arrived. Can be more quantitative about it. Okay, let's consider and let's model a bit the noise. So we have in here, like this part in here, it's kind of a noise that since, you know, noise is a very accumulation of different sources, we are going to model it as a Gaussian distribution, where like if we are having no photons that arrive to the cell, then it will be just a Gaussian like this. What happens if we like start an arrive 1 photon? So it will be an accumulative thing. It will get an impulse and it will generate some current. So we can model it as n equal to 1. So it will be the intensity plus an intensity and added intensity in here. Okay? And this intensity, considering that the photons are independent and have just additive sources, are additive to the global intensity, so like they will like generate more current because they are affecting like additive. Like I don't know if I'm explaining well. If a photon arrives, it will change the structure of one molecule and that will generate current. So if 2 photons arrive to the same cell, like there will be 2 molecules that will be able to make double the intensity because we'll be affecting more. Okay. So if we put this distribution and we add all the potential sources, that is the conditional of like having a source of light that is generating n photons, plus the condition that if like I receive n photons, I will have like an I intensity, okay? And I add over all the n photons because I don't know how many photons is generating the source, okay? These are the results and these are the experiments. So our model like explains everything perfectly, okay? So we are really like having this 0 noise, then 1 quantum, 2 quantums, 3 quantums, etc. with the correct probability. So really our cell is like making this counting number, okay? This is already like pretty amazing that how this is being generated. But I like hide from you like some information. And the information, and there's an explained discrepancies that, as I've shown you before, I told you that k is equal to 6, okay? And they did this experiment, but this experiment was done like from some other lab at the same time. And this was the experiment of Heck, that was the experiment I showed you. But some other people say, yeah, I did experiment, I have k equal to 2, and this is not similar at all. How can we explain this? So remember that we are doing an experiment about psychophysics. That is, we need a person, and a person saying, hey, I see something, or hey, I haven't seen something. So you are already like trying to solve an answer through a verbal situation, and depending on the threshold that the person has, like, and the willingness that it has to say, yes, I've seen or not I've seen, like, it is different. What I mean with this? The different false positive rate acceptance, so that is the willingness that a subject has to say, yes, I've seen like a light, like depending on the stress that the experimenters have say, okay, are you really sure? The probability of saying yes or saying no, like the tolerance rate will be different, okay? The second thing is that and needed for the explanation, according to Barlow, is the necessity of spontaneous excitation, or dark photons, okay? Dark photons means that there's no photons at all. It's just that we are at not zero Kelvin temperature, so we have fluctuations in thermal that, like these like particles that I have been telling you that are excited when the photon arrives, may be spontaneously generated and like change the configuration and send a response. So even if you are in the dark, you will see a spot, okay? So like for the first one, like just to try to explain this, the false positive rate, if you see these are the distribution when you have noise or noise plus signal. So if you want the fewest errors, you will just like, if you have these two Gaussians will be in here. So there's a probability in here of like saying no. Okay, imagine that in here I say no or I say yes. So all this probability is saying, no, I have seen something, but really a photon has happened. This is the probability of seeing, oh yeah, I have seen a photon, but there was no photon, it was just noise, okay? Of course, like if we move this line, we can make it with almost no false alarms. That means, are you really sure that you have seen a photon? Okay, so then the probability with these discrepancies, like, is able, like when you make the fittings, able to switch the case. Okay, so in this case, Hecht was using blank pulses. That is, at some point he was saying, yeah, I have sent a pulse, but I haven't sent something, just to check the false positives, okay? So it was more on this region here, no false alarms, making very sure. That's why like the shift is toward the like 6 to more photon content, because it was people was only saying yes when they were really for sure seeing a light, okay? And Bedell was willing like just to say yes or no, like everything was pulses with no false control, okay? Yeah, so what the dark spontaneous source will account for, like this is the mean number of photons like from the source. This will be like the source plus the dark noise or the dark photons that are just like thermal fluctuations that also follow Poissonian statistics, and that's why you can add them. Okay, is this theory correct? This dark photon theory is correct. So one of way that is done in quantum physics, atomic physics, when you have count detectors. I don't know like how many of you are in this field of atomic physics or like nuclear physics. So the counter detector, what you do is, in order to reduce the noise, is to cool down the object. The only small problem is that humans don't like to be cooled down. You know, if you take the body of a human temperature down, like people tend to die, and I don't like that. So you cannot do very experiments like doing the same way. But then, like we can go to a very different object that is toads, like cold blood animals, and these ones you can like cool them down and check at different temperatures if the thermal fluctuations are really true. If I cool things down, the thermal fluctuations will be lower, and the rates of acceptance and non-acceptance will be different. So this is one of the experiments that was done with dog, with frogs, and with human that like they stay there. So in here, what is measured is the level in this threshold when you always say yes. Okay, so you control the always say yes with the temperature. And this is the thermal isomerization, that is like the protein, like the particle changing, like a structure, spontaneously. So what you see is that there's an almost like 8/10. Of course, like this is not extremely rigorous because like doing statistics with n equal to 5 and with different animals is not like a super hard evidence, but like you have like this linear behavior more or less, or this tendency that's suggested. The second way of solving this problem that we're having here of the acceptance is, okay, until now we have to say, okay, yes, I see the light, or no, I don't see any light. But what if I give, instead of a binary scale, I give like different point scale, okay? So saying how bright the light was, okay? So if I see how bright the light was more or less in the same scale, like if it's true that we're counting the photons, if like more like 3 photons or 4 photons were giving like these higher peaks that we have seen before, in theory your brain will say, okay, yeah, I have seen a brighter light, so I give a higher grade to it. Okay, so this experiment was done, like instead of doing binary, doing this qualitative. And the interesting thing is that do it at different mean ratings. So the intensity and the mean rating like is proportional, that is what we are expecting. But in here, so this is just one experiment. So at one experiment with the mean rating, the rating that the individuals are giving, that is this not qualitative yes or no, but binary yes or no, but this grading from 0 to 6, this distribution is following Poissonian statistics. It's following Poissonian statistics means saying yes or no, like qualitatively, you are reproducing the spectrum of the noise. The spectrum of the generation of photons, that is also Poissonian, which suggests that really like they are like counting and seeing like the different distribution of a spectrum. What is also interesting is that with intensity 0, that is, there's no light coming from the source, the mean rating of saying, yes, I have seen a light, is non-zero, which means that there's evidence that people is seeing like these lights even in the dark part, just because we have like this background noise, that is these thermal fluctuations that are generating this spontaneous non-zero like pulses, okay? So there's a lot more that I could talk about like light. In fact, what we have seen here is just like a bit like the general part from photon to perception. So we have just jumped of the details of everything in these experiments. This is just the type of the iceberg. There's a whole literature on these psychophysics effects and the phenomenon of life, okay? So in here, like in rhodospin is the molecule that is the one that is photoactivated in the moment that we arrive. Works at the femto scale, and in fact, like when developing the lasers during the last like lasers, each time were able to send pulses and pulses that were even faster, and they always were coming back to the rhodospin to check like how short the rhodospin change of configuration was. It's a femtosecond scale. The change of configuration of rhodospin is at the same orders of magnitude of the quantic disentanglement, okay, the coherence of the quantum scale, which means that, like, yeah, for making vision, we have to go to the extreme, like when things even like stay entangled, you know, with the quantum level. If we go to already like the neural part, like, first, we need to amplify the signal. We are just counting the photon that is generating, that's generate a cascade, but this cascade is already a chemical, but we have to receive and see things very fast. So how this process is being generated and how this cascade for amplifying, for getting a current in your brain or signal is amplified in these levels of velocity is also like questions that can be asked. And of course, like once it gets into your brain, how do you transform it in a perception? So this whole field has generated a whole field in technology that started with the first neurons inspired with the brain and has developed into deep neural networks. So like now computer vision and artificial intelligence just have come with these first ideas that were generated by the first neuron model. Okay. So I would like just to go to just a second project. I hope I still have time. So we have seen vision, and that's I have seen and I have shown you like how this vision, or with like the resources that they had at that time. So we're talking about like the middle 20s. They still didn't have much. Were able to think like very nice ideas that were macroscopic like experiments, and we're having results of very microscopic or even quantic like levels, so very small noises. So it was a very smart way of going and getting this kind of results. Okay. The second project that I would like to, or the second direction of all the different topics of biophysics that I want to talk about, or I would like to talk about, is development, is where I'm working. Okay. So development you have already seen. You have seen already the larva of Drosophila. And this is what we look like this is mouse, but humans look like pretty similar. We started just with one cell, okay? And by like 13 days, like a mouse have already like generated all the structures. So in 30 days, you have doing all the plan, how and where your legs are going to be. They are purely symmetrical and everything is going to be and is done in a very messy way. So how it's possible that we get all this reproducibility, and how we like all these cells like this side, because like this is a symmetry breaking process. If you see, like we start all symmetrical with just one cell, and at some point like this cell divides and they decide and communicate and say, okay, you are going to break symmetry and you are not going to be the same fate as me. Okay. So this symmetry process and self-organization is happening in a very high dimensional space. So in each of these cells, there's usually about 27,000 genes. So we have like many tools and many rules inherent in here. Also, it's not only the genes plus proteins plus RNA that is like far above like the genome. Is that the cells communicate. They are throwing chemical sensors to the other ones to say, hey, I'm in this state or not in this state. There's also collective motion, there's fluidics, like cells decide to migrate at some point, they start to exert forces and go to different directions in a collective way. There's external coupling, because like there's mother gradients that are being showed, like in Drosophila they are more clear, they are inside the egg, so one point of the egg is showing like signals that are generating gradients. So we have a very wide set toolbox for like doing like this important process, okay? So it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. But the good thing and fact that could be like taken is, well, what will be the most naive approach for physicists who like to do really hardcore maths? And yeah, imagine just like one of these small processes. This is just the process of like sending a signal outside the membrane and coming back to the nucleus. This is one of the few pathways I'm talking about. In here, maybe there's 3 genes involved in here, okay? And these 3 genes are already involving all these particles inside the cell. So you can write the equations, say, okay, I will write all these details about it. So if you write that, you end up with something like this, okay? So this doesn't look very easy to fit to anything. We are talking about thousands of parameters. And in fact, this is a very interesting problem, and it has generated a field or a line of research that like this is the main author, like the big chief on sloppy model theory. That is the one also that happened, like it's not only in biology, but also in physics happened with particle physics, with these models that are being applied where they are trying to put all the details inside them. And what the sloppy model theory says is that, hey, you are like putting me this, but most part of the parameters doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter what parameter or what the number you give, that you can fit the model perfectly and it's not like problematic at all. So basically what he's trying to do with sloppy model theory is really to figure it out what of this is really relevant for explaining the process at hand, okay? But we can go in a different way. We have done our courses, and In the early 60s, Waddington, that it was a scientific divulgator, came up with a way of just explaining like to people how development could work. And it could work something like this. Imagine that you have the cells and they are in a pluripotent state and they at some point decide to go over a valley, like this developmental valley, to go to different fates. Okay, so they start to like commit to something. At some point where they end in the final part of the valley, they already specialize and become their specific fates. Okay, I have gone through this valley of development. The question is, what is this valley? So this is what Waddington was calling the epigenetic. Epigenetic is just the qualitative characterization of the cells. Okay, epigenetic is when you do and you cut, you see, okay, this cell is a neuron, this cell is a muscle, because clearly you can see it. Okay, is what the external results of the final thing. So things are already so differentiated that they are very clear, like be able to understand them, even with classical techniques. So this description can be formalized. So Waddington, of course, was the divulgator, just like making a picture and describing it. But do we know something like is similar in our fields, in using maths or using physics? So yes, we have dynamical systems, so ODEs and SDEs. And we have catastrophe theory, the René Thom. The catastrophe theory basically states that even if you have a very huge dimensional dynamical system, phase transitions, so the changes in the transitions, are really happening in a very low dimensional representation. I don't know how many of you have done like chaos theory, catastrophe theory, dynamical systems, but I don't know. But well, basically what I have been telling you before is that we are lying in this 27,000 dimensional space. But what this theory is saying is that I don't need a 27,000 dimensional space in the moment that, for example, two cells that are transiting, they decide, okay, I'm going to be a neuron, I'm going to be a muscle. This decision in here, this transition in phase, so from being equal to symmetry break process where we go in two directions, it really lies in a very low dimensional space. So I can model it with classical, normal, canonical forms. So these canonical forms are already like mathematically very well established, like the possible forms in low dimensional spaces of all the possibilities of this bifurcation can happen. So I can make a model that is really like working just like with these small like properties, using the minimum parameters. And instead of using all the details of the system, I will just work with these canonical forms. Okay? So one of the things and the arguments to say and think, okay, maybe this theory can work out is first, the epigenetic fates, that is the cell types that we are having, are not 27,000 different. There are just a few hundred in our body. We have maybe 200 different cell types. So we really don't, all the spectrum is redundant. All these dimensions are more than the dimensions that we need in order to describe all this process of bifurcations. Also, like how cells, like if you think about evolution, like you have an organism and that organism at some point like decides to specialize some cells for doing a function. The most plausible thing for this bifurcation is not that they decide to coordinate a lot of the different mechanisms to specialize. Maybe it's just okay, now I get an additional stability that generates like this potential bifurcation, and that allows in a low dimensional space of the possible mutations that has happened. Okay, because the mutations are accumulative but linear. It's not that they accumulate so many. Okay. And the also thing and we like theoreticians is that the things are minimal. So the easier that we are, the more plausible that we are able to have a predictable model about them. Okay. And also a very interesting thing and good thing about catastrophe theory also is that since we cannot measure everything, biology is very complex, you cannot extract all the cells and measure these 27,000 dimensions, because usually if you want to measure that, you destroy the cell. Okay, so a good way of going is, okay, we don't have such so quantitative measures, we go more to qualitative measures, okay? But qualitative, I mean, like, as in chaos theory. Chaos cannot be modeled like being quantitative. What you have, for example, is a Lyapunov exponent that says more or less when you are going to go to this random and not predictable regime. So the qualitative is like how things will change. You will see it in a second, okay? Let's test this theory. Let's try to like use dynamical systems and chaos theory to model this description. So you have like a plague, you put cells in there, and these cells are in what is called epiblast, that it's a pluripotent cell lineage, and then you add chemicals to them, okay? So depending on the chemicals that you add to them, like these cells go to this fate or to this fate. What it has been shown is that, or the experiments doesn't show that from this fate you can jump to this fate, okay? Or from this fate to this fate. So it seems that the cells are taking a binary choice qualitatively. On the other hand, like if you go to caudal epiblast and you allow them to develop a bit more, they can go to another two. But these two can jump between each other. Depending on the chemical you put, sometimes these cells jump to here, or these cells jump to here, okay? So what we are seeing and talking about these modeling transitions is that what this decision in here is qualitatively a binary choice of this form, of this is will be the canonical form, okay, where epi can go here or go there. But if you see, like, if you want to jump from one to the other, you will like go to the regime, to the basin of attraction of epi again. So you have to go back qualitatively to epi and then specialize again to caudal epiblast. The binary flip, on the other hand, and will depend on the parameter itself, but if you see it in here, what happens is that all three coexist and they can jump freely between them, okay? So we have already like two qualitative possible phase transitions that can be formalized in a very simple form, okay? So forget about this, just go like if you go, this is the canonical form of this phase transition. This is the canonical form according to catastrophe theory of this second transition. You can like apply a function to stitch them. So this function is basically, okay, glue this catastrophe theory like with this next level. And you end with just differential equation in 2 dimensions because you don't need more for model this where you stitch both, okay? This model with all these decisions just has 6 parameters. Doesn't have like, I told you that with 3 genes in there that like we have 1,000 parameters, and here we have 6 parameters. This is the minimal model that you can generate that describes the topology of this dynamical system. And is it correct? Or can we use it really to get predictions of this? So these are all the attractors, all the models and bifurcation points, and we can see that if you put the different signals, how the system will behave. So where the cells that are starting in here like change when you are doing different perturbations with the days and the movement. This is a different experiment, like with a different perturbation. So in here, all the cells were moving here. In here, all the cells are moving here, and but some others will stay. And at some point where you get the signals, then you have like one up, down, like you have different proportions that are explained qualitatively. And the good thing is that these are the experiments. And if you see the simulations of this model, like it's already like pretty explanatory of everything. Of course, you have to feed the data, but you just feed the data just partially with some of the experiments, and the results like can be poorly predicted. So we have used things coming from mathematical and topological ideas, topological concepts of dynamical systems, to come up with a smarter approach or a more quantitative approach to what development is without having to put all these details, which has a lot of power of strength to describe it. So yeah, this is a very simple model and it's a very predictive model, and it has come just from a physicist's perspective, no, a more quantitative perspective. So what are the take-home messages? Hopefully I don't want to get very boring. I would like to stop in here. So we have seen an example of vision Okay, this is optimization principle that we have seen that is working at like the minimum limitations of physics to be like I made observations. Also, we have seen that we can apply dynamical systems theory and the concepts from mathematical topology and everything to describe complexities, also like the details of development in at least in this case, and more generally, like that I want to show and that you get is that this life is amazing the way like it shows. So, like all the different ways of organization or the different principles that like we can apply or we can describe with our physicist point of view. And yes, like we're able to give like this vision to it. And I don't know, I hope that you enjoy. If you want to get more into detail of biophysics or like you feel more curious about it, I advise you to read this book. Is this kind of huge books, like 600 pages book, but I like it a lot from William Bialik. He's a Princeton professor because it combines biology but being a very rigorous physicist, and it has a lot of details, a lot of intuition, getting to philosophical details, and I like this combination of really what are the depth or the questioning about what we are physicists and what is our understanding of in this case life or vision of the world. And thank you. I think that's it. Yes.
Okay, we don't have too much time to questions, but if anyone has a question. Okay.
Hola. Thank you for the talk. And I have a question about the beginning, because you said that you were able, or they were able to isolate a single photon, not 2 photons, 3 photons, to send them to a screen and then to see if a person can see it. So how can you isolate a photon? How could they?
You don't isolate the photon.
Okay, so no, I mean
you are describing how like what is the source of the photons, and the source of the photons is a Poissonian distribution. This is just like bright field light.
Okay. But then.
So, like when you don't have a laser, and you cannot isolate a photon, you are sending this distribution. Like if you solve the equations, you get this distribution of photons, like at very dim intensities.
Okay, yeah, because I was very surprised when you said, okay, no, so 1 photon maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, so
no, this is
lasers.
making to the very minimum of intensity, so the distribution, like this is the mean distribution, and then like of course you have like 0, 1, 2, 3, you don't know how many you are going to send.
Okay, now I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess we have time for a last question.
I guess maybe this question is related to what Sylvia was asking. You're using, for that experiment, they were using, I guess, natural light.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if the frequency or the energy of, if they would be using lasers, how would affect the energy of the laser to our, for example, if we are more sensitive to detecting, I don't know, within the visible spectrum.
I think they haven't done that, or they haven't commented on that, but it's true that the frequencies that they were using there, like when they are doing experiments nowadays with lasers for the vision, they are using, I think, is 550 Hz, because it's the one where there's the peak of rhodopsin, that is the light that we are perceiving the best. But what is interesting about lasers now with quantum tools is that you can change the distribution, so it doesn't need to be Poissonian anymore. So when you are working with that, you can work the difference between the ratio of the dark photons noise and what are the photon distributions in here. And they did that in order to test, and like they have also validated through lasers that this dark noise, white noise of photons, dark photons exist because of that, because they have changed the other part of the distribution. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the talk, and we'll meet after the break.